Good?
You're good.
So, good morning, everybody. I understand there was a wild back in the alien revelry last night. Everyone got arrested.
You bird stuff.
So yesterday we really did the work, and today we can just have fun with it. The point of all that, the point of everything that, everything that was, that we were looking at yesterday is the simple fact that what your experience is more than you're used to thinking it is. No matter how sophisticated an idea or understanding you have of what's going on, it's beyond that, and beyond that, and beyond that. And this fact is explicit and objective and available. So it's easily possible to be with your experience in ways and discover the ways in which it is more. There's more there than you're used to letting yourself notice. And this moreness has wonderful implication. And the implication of it is very different and allows much more expanded horizons and possibilities perhaps than the implications of your normalcy, your normal perspective, normal view. So which is pretty simple. One point I want to make, which we touched on a little bit yesterday, but we didn't really go into in much depth, is that it's easy to think you go from Kansas to Oz, right? But it's not really like that. You don't leave Kansas. Kansas is Oz. Kansas is in Oz. So it's not like you leave your normalcy and discover some sort of transcendental condition. Your normalcy turns out to be the transcendental condition. Surprise, surprise. So it comes with. So it's kind of an opening and expansion of your possibilities without necessarily going to anything new or going to anything different. So it's not like you need to give up normalcy and become, whatever, some kind of exotic, whatever it is that you may imagine. You actually look at your actuality, your normalcy, just, the real world. And the real world is the real world has always been, but it's so much more than that. Without being canceled out or erased as being the normal real world it's always been. It's just more. So this is it's a kind of a deepening, or there's more richness, there's more depth, there's more bandwidth than we're used to letting ourselves notice in the experience. And so the whole trick of the yoga is simply be with any experience whatsoever and notice the way in which whatever you're experiencing, if you just sort of feel what's there outside the context of what you sort of snap normalcy of the way you usually take it, you'll easily and readily discover, wow, there's something here, there's some richness here that I'm not used to letting myself, melt into, enjoy. And just that simple, it can be a very small thing, and it can be looking at a picture, looking at a flower, anything, feeling a texture, hearing a sound, and just noticing that there's more there than more depth, more richness, more dimensionality that you're used to letting yourself notice. It retrains your entire orientation to your experience, and you sort of ramp up your own sensitivity to noticing this sort of enhanced richness, enhanced dimensionality that is actually always here and always available. It's the human, it seems to be the perversion or whatever of human psychology that we censor. The human psyche, the human mind censors and limits experience, imposes it. Experience is not limited whatsoever. Experience is not imposing any limitation on you. On the contrary, to the extent there's any limitation, it's the habitual nature of your mind to form normalcy, to form simplicity, to sort of dull things down, just arbitrarily. But even when it does that, nothing has actually been dulled down. Of course, all the richness is there, is available. And so it's just it's a simple matter of letting yourself notice that fact, and that opens the doors to more noticing, which of course, and there's no limit. You know, no matter how intimately you are with amazing aspects of experience, there's always more, always more. And the moreness heads off in strange directions. It's not like it's just more of the same. It's more, but it sort of shoots out in fractal expansion into, and obviously you can't describe it or say what it is literally, but this is available. And that's really the whole point of all of this stuff, is to, that you, if you are interested, you can avail yourself of this kind of experience. So in general, that's the principle of the thing. It's very, very simple. But then in practice, we have all the complexity of our habits, the complexity of our particular biases and orientations and so on. And so individually, we each come up against ourselves in this process of our own quirks and our own, natures, which makes it endlessly fascinating in terms of the sort of roadblocks we provide, we erect for ourselves and in our own process. And here we are. Or more precisely, here you are. For me, here I am.
So you mentioned roadblocks. Can you speak a little bit to that? I mean, roadblocks gives me the sense of, well, there's clearly, something you're going to need to do to get around or over.
No, there's only roadblocks. Does there seem to be roadblocks for you? Is there anything you could come up against?
Lots of things just in terms of normal life things.
Okay, well, that's roadblocks then.
Yeah. And I just work with them as best I know how.
Sure. But the trick is, however you're used to being with it, there's alternates. There's other ways. There's other modes. There's the old saying, a dozen ways to skin a cat or whatever it is applies to this in spades. So however you're used to being with your experience, no matter what, no matter how broad it is and how multidimensional and so on, there's more. There's always more. There's no limit, absolutely no limit, no end. So to the extent anything seems to be in any way limited, that's a roadblock. You're creating, essentially you're erecting that sense of limitation. Not deliberately, of course, but just the way your process, your mentality approaches it. As a sort of a rule of thumb, in terms of the process of the yoga, it's very, very, very simple. Anything that seems to be anything means that's a point of blockage for noticing.
That's constant.
Yeah. Anything that seems to be anything. And I don't mean seems to be anything, but seems to be anything in particular. Because everything is what it is and is more. But if it just is what it is, and somehow it feels like it stops there, you're providing that stoppage. In imagination, essentially, as a projection.
What's interesting is when you're sitting with us, you give very concrete examples, like the glass or, the pillow. But in our life, it seems like there's much more complex, convoluted constructs. Is this what it is? And there's lots of different facets to it. Seems way more complex.
Yeah, but the whole point is work where it's easy, work where it's simple. You have this big, messy, sloppy life and all these issues and all this confusion. But look, there's just this just here. And wow, so you can work with this. And the wonderful thing about this process, the wonderful thing about this yoga, about this sensitivity training, because basically all it is sensitivity training. You're training yourself to be more sensitive to the nuance of your experience, is that any headway you make anywhere applies across the board to everything. So if you get good at, so to speak, at doing it in simple ways, it applies to all the big, messy, complex stuff too. So it's not like you need to do it here and then do it here and do it here and sort of cumulatively do it everywhere. Do it anywhere and you've done it everywhere. It's like sinking a boat. You don't need to put a hole in everywhere. Just one nice hole will do it. Just put the hole here and wait. Be patient. So yeah, go to something simple. Go to a simple, a simple visual experience. Looking at a color, or looking at a flower, or looking at a rock, or hearing a sound, or feeling. You feel that. It's like I might just say, oh, it's just my finger feeling the table, but be with what's really there. It's a universe. And the finger disappears and the table disappears and it just opens into this astounding symphony. This amazing, literally like just from that, or from anything. So it doesn't matter. So do. In other words, the point is do it where it's easy, do it where it's simple and direct, and what you discover there applies everywhere. Like Lyme disease. We were talking about Lyme disease. It's an example. A tick doesn't need to bite you everywhere. It needs to bite you one place, and the whole system is done for. Because it's basically retraining the psychology of your perception to let yourself notice how multidimensional and slippery and open-ended all experiential characteristics are, and which is the opposite. Because typically for our psyches, from our lifelong indoctrination, we've trained ourselves to think of things, to simplify things and shut them down. And this is just a glass. It's just a boring plastic glass. Who cares? It's not. It just plain isn't. Experientially, it is. It has no end. It has no limit. It has no bottom. It's infinite, everything. Just this. Sure, it's a plastic. It doesn't stop being a plastic glass. Yeah, it's a crappy plastic glass with scratches on it. It's not that you leave Kansas and go to Oz. Kansas comes along because Kansas turns out to be Oz. So this crappy plastic glass is infinity. It actually is. And if you don't see it, clearly and obviously, it's because you're not letting yourself see it, not because it's hard to see. So it's all about, it's like sensitivity training, retraining yourself to be able to notice the slipperiness, the multidimensionality, to call it the bandwidth. Your experience is, I don't know, if you're a technical person, so you understand this bandwidth. We're used to shutting down the bandwidth on our experience, and we're doing like some crappy modem with no bandwidth. We're looking at our experience like that, but it's not the information that's there that's low bandwidth. It's our looking at it that's low bandwidth. We're shutting down the bandwidth. The bandwidth is here, and it's just like it's just huge. It's mind-boggling, and so it's just a matter of letting yourself, opening up the portal of what happened. It's all metaphor. To letting yourself notice that, and it's easy to do because we're already always doing it. You're already always seeing more, but usually we sort of just ignore it because we just sort of check it off our list and go on to the next whatever thing we want to check off our list to simplify things. Yeah.
I had an experience about pain related to what you were discussing yesterday. I had a strong belly pain. It was coming with waves. And after a little while, I I was more and more accepting the pain, not in a way that's fun, but in a way that's it. And it was like not sleeping, but going in. No more pushing away the sensation.
Right, exactly. That's the key right there.
And then this strong belly pain did not stop, but it looks like more like something like I was listening to, more like something like music, was Technicolor's thing associated to that.
Mm-hmm.
So the pain was still here, with big waves, quite uncomfortable. The fear of dying was still there, because that was attached to the pain. But on the other hand, it was a very pleasant experience where I had the thing to rest.
Uh-huh.
Then I don't know what happened, probably I just fall asleep. But and the morning after, I was trying to go in the same place with my resistance to work.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that's, like we were talking about, that's a bigger, more complex issue. So with something like pain, it's localized. I mean, there's a focus, so you can find it to look at it in a way, so that makes it easier.
It was lots through the sensations. I get the thing that
yes,
it was like looking at the sensation through the sensation, and we go something was like slipping in.
Yeah.
Where there is less resistance.
Yeah, letting yourself see what's really present. This is a really important point that's implicit in what you're saying. There's never abstractions present. Abstractions do not exist. Only specifics exist. So, if there's an abstraction like work that you're worried about, work is an abstraction if it's work. But when the worry is there, there's a thought present. And the thought is not an abstraction. It's actually a kind of a sensation. We're not used to thinking of thoughts as sensations, but and this can be part of something you can explore and play with. When you're thinking, you're thinking because something is there. Just like when you're feeling something, you're feeling something because something is there. There's a sensation, a stimulant. It's as if there's there is a signal there that there's a positive, specific, concrete thing. And thought's the same way. Thought is something. Thought is a stuff. Thought is a subject. Thought is a presence of something. And obviously, it's a subtle sort of a something relative to touch and so on, perhaps. But abstractions do not exist. Abstractions are spin doctored into existence based on concrete presences. So thought exists, but the meaning of thought doesn't exist. Thought has no meaning. Thought has presence. And yet, so when you go to the abstraction, you can't work with that because you're not really with the abstraction. You're with the present thought or the present emotion or whatever. So that's why if you let yourself feel it in the body or feel it as a present, whatever discover the mental energy or whatever it is as a sensory presence, then you get the concreteness of it, and you can work with that because that's what it really is. That's the objective reality. The conceptualization is not an objective reality. So abstraction does not exist. It just plain doesn't exist. Only concrete presence exists. Everything has substance, and anything that doesn't have substance isn't anything. It just doesn't exist. And substance is infinite. So, substance as let's say the substantial sensation. So I feel the chair. If I close my eyes and feel the chair, forget it's a chair, forget I'm feeling it, forget it's my finger. What is it that's present? It's just this amazing, these waves, and it can feel like music. It's just infinitely complex and subtle and dynamic and dimensional, and you know, you can just go into that. It's like you can go into that like you're going out. It's like Star Trek. You're just going out into the universe to explore. And there's no limit to how far you can go. Just that. You know, just my stupid finger on the stupid chair. And this applies to any, you know, present sensory stimulus whatsoever. And there's nothing exists besides what we might call sensory stimuli. Nothing exists. There are no abstractions. I mean, that's part of how we bollocks ourselves up. We pretend there's these abstractions that exist, and we're oriented as abstractions. There's no such thing.
If the abstractions were just in thought, which is ephemeral and arguably non-harming, what turns the imagination or the abstraction into a somatic reality is how thought somaticizes.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm worried about work, thinking about that doesn't bother me at all. But when it trickles into the body, the sense of body, the gripping, you know, throughout the system, that's the suffering.
Well,
So
it defines it. The concept defines a belief structure, an interpretive framework, which implies an entire universal structure. It implies a you and a situation and an orientation, and it implies
Absolutely.
problems, and implies potential solutions or not.
yes.
And all of a sudden, you're just in this incredible plot line that's of intricacy. You're a rat in a maze that you've imagined into existence, basically, based on this one little seed. It's like a crystal. You drop a crystal into the solution, and that crystal becomes a seed for the whole thing to solidify.
Yeah, and the feeling of it, I mean, really lends to the whole 3D, right?
Absolutely.
Perplexity of what I just thought and I'm now worried about is real.
It becomes a self-fulfilling actuality based on essentially belief and fantasy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you're watching a movie and, you know, the hero's really on the, oh my God, it's a real cliffhanger, and the bad guys are about to get him, and you don't know if he's going to save the hero. You know, your adrenaline's going, your heart's going. It's like, it's light on a screen. There's nothing, there's no harm, no foul. So all this stuff is bootstrapped up. It becomes a self-fulfilling actuality that is being actualized by belief in a fantasy. And there's nothing there. You know, the actuality of it is there's no basis for it. Or let's say the basis for it is not what it seems to be.
But once the somaticization is triggered from an abstract seed, now that's actuality, right? Thought appearing in consciousness is actuality. A somatic reaction to fantasy is an actuality. And then that actuality, of course, splinters off, spins off into 1,000 other referential fantasies. And then more somaticization accompanies that, and that's what we call my life.
The other side of the coin is every bit of that actuality is a doorway to transcendence.
Sure.
So as soon as something is somaticized, then all of a sudden it's a sensation. And if the sensation just remains a sensation as an implication of the belief structure, then it's not questioned. It's opaque. It's a wall. It's a trapping. It's an entrapment. But if you actually, so here's a somatic sensation. It's an actuality. So if you look at, well, what is this actuality that is here? And all of a sudden, it's a doorway. It's a doorway into discovering that it's much more than it's seeming to be. And all of a sudden, you're outside. It's an exit from that whole, that whole edifice of implication.
Well, so then there has to be
in other words, actuality, specificity is where you find freedom. In the concrete presence, anything that is actually present, actual sensation. Let's call it a sensation. But let's just say all experiential characteristics are sensations. A thought is a sensation. If it's a thought of this or of that, the of is just pie in the sky. But the thought is a sensation. It's an energy presence in consciousness, whatever. You can't define what it is, obviously. But that concrete presence is all that's actually there. You know, it's like when you're at the movies and you're all working over the plot line and it's all exciting, and it's like, wait a minute, what's really here? And you look and you see, there's light on a screen, and there's these big pieces of paper back there rattling like this and making a loud sound. So there's light and sound. I mean, what am I worked up about? there's no good guys, there's no bad guys, there's no heroine, there's no nothing. It's light and sound. But then, oh no, we're back in the interpretive framework, and all of a sudden, what's actually there gets turned into this enormous plot of implication where it just isn't there.
Peter, isn't that also reality as well? Just the ability to cognize or to create.
That can
It's
happen.
illusion. It's illusion.
That can happen is reality.
An amazing quality.
That can happen is reality, but it's not real reality.
Yeah.
It's not what's actually happening. It's real that it's actual that it can seem like that. It's actual that actuality can seem to be other than it is. But actuality never becomes other than it is. And but the most perverse part of it is in taking actuality and turning it into seeming other, we always make it less. It diminishes what's actually there. That's the tragic part of it. Our fantasies are much, much less than the actuality. The actuality is infinite. The light on the screen is much, much more than the movie. We're used to thinking of it the other way around. It's just light on the screen. Who cares? Let me get into the movie and you get some action here. You get something going on. But actually, the light is more than the movie. The movie, the plot line is an insipid, simple thing. Whereas the light is universes. It's infinite. The energy of the experiential characteristics are constituted of is literally infinite. So
Inherent within reality is the ability to cognize illusion.
yes.
So that is part of reality, but the illusion itself is not reality.
Well, this is getting into hair splitting. Yes and no, but it's irrelevant. The point is that when you go into these interpretive frameworks, the important fact to realize is these interpretive frameworks are always diminishment. They're always censorious. They're censorship. They always make it less than. They don't build on and elaborate. They don't take a small, limited actuality and make it bigger. On the contrary, they take an open-ended. It's as if you had an old-fashioned TV set with billions and billions of dots of snow, chaos, right? And you connect a few of the dots to make a pattern, and you turn that into a story. There's so many dots you're leaving out. And this is exactly what we do with our experience. Your visual field right now is full of an infinity of information. And the average person shuts it down to, oh no, there's 20 people in the room and 20 chairs, and there's, a few rugs and, some stuff. And I'm seeing a few thousand things, if I really, you're seeing fucking infinity. And just to shut that down to a few thousand things, you're cheating yourself. You're taking the rest of it all and just throwing it out. You're denying it. You're saying it's not here. You're not letting yourself enjoy it, participate in it. And there may be implication there that, maybe those dots, if you connected them, you get a whole different storyline. And then the other dots, you connect them, you get a whole different storyline. Maybe there's infinite storylines that can come out of the same set of dots if you connect them differently.
So you couldn't even tell a story without excluding. You have to exclude
Yeah, of
everything
course.
about the story to have a story. Anyway,
Of course.
if you included everything that's there, you actually couldn't hold a narrative for a second.
No, of course not. Because it would really transcend the realm of human meaningfulness.
Yeah.
But what this transcends the realm of human meaningfulness. What you are transcends the realm of human meaningfulness.
Right.
And you're cheating yourself by not letting yourself enjoy that fact. I mean, you're free to.
Right.
You don't have to. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I like being a human being. I like my stories. I like my world. Cool. How about it? You got it. Enjoy it.
It's like,
But the point is, there are options. You can have more. There is more. And since there is more, you can avail yourself of it if you
right.
discover how to, if you learn mindfulness of it.
Or enjoy the story, like the movie,
Yeah. Well, when you discover there's more, the implication of that is you get the arbitrariness of your narrative, and you get to enjoy it in more freedom. It's like going lucid in a dream.
Right.
You don't necessarily need to stop the dream, but you can still go back to the dream and enjoy it, but you know it's just a dream. So it's like, so all of a sudden it's all sweetness and light and fun.
Yeah.
Oh, the monster's coming to get me. Great, what a hoot. You know, hope it eats me feet first this time so I can enjoy it for longer. Because it's just a dream. And you know it's just a dream because you have the context. So again, it's not a matter of leaving Kansas. You don't really leave the human perspective.
Right.
But when you get to the actual perspective, it's so much more than that. And you are that. Then the human perspective has a perspective of summer camp.
Right.
You know, it's just okay, that's fun. Let's pretend. Let's go to Disneyland.
Right.
You know, let's do Mickey Mouse. What a hoot, you know? But it's not like, oh, there's Mickey Mouse. What am I going to do? What am I going to say to them? It really matters. A lot hangs on the balance. It's like, yeah, right.
It's funny though, because we make a differentiation. So the dream analogy is great because the lucid dream, that's so clear. It's inherent that, oh, okay, it's a dream. The willing suspension of disbelief that we sign the contract of when we go to see a movie. We know somewhere inside we're deciding that we're going to believe. We're going to suspend our disbelief. But then
Exactly.
it seems to be this.
And that's what makes it fun.
Right.
Because you know it's not. If you forgot the movie was a movie,
Right.
it might really suck.
Right.
I mean, most movies, you know, they jerk you around, and if they were really jerking you around, it'd be like, wait a minute.
But what is that? So the important suffering causing abstraction is the one that we bring to real REAL life, and not REEL life. So that we know, but this is real. This isn't a lucid dream. This isn't a movie. This is my fucking life. And so
Sure.
it seems like it's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's the prison. That's the interpretive framework that's been reified, and you forget that it's just arbitrary.
Right.
So this yoga is basically retraining yourself to notice the true background of your actual physical, objective reality, and then you discover that is so vast compared to these, our human narrations of it. And when you get that context, it's like a big logo. I mean, that's why it's called liberation. Because all of a sudden you realize, hey, this doesn't matter. In that sense, the lucid dream analogy is right on the money.
Right.
When you get that, me being Peter Brown, and whether I succeed or fail, or whether I this or that, or whether I'm happy or sad, or whether I'm healthy or sick, is laughable.
Yeah.
In terms of what hangs in the balance.
Yeah.
Actually, nothing hangs in the balance. Whereas if I am Peter Brown, all of a sudden all that stuff really matters.
And again, you would have had to exclude the rest of the universe to stick with I'm Peter Brown, I'm sick, or whatever.
Exactly. I mean, if I didn't know, and that's exactly what we do. We exclude all the information that doesn't fit that doesn't support our story.
Mm-hmm.
We just deny it. We just censor it out of existence. It's essentially an auto-hypnotic kind of a mechanism where we just don't even know that it's there. We know it's there, but we don't let ourselves know that it's there, so we don't know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've censored and shut down this open-ended, multi-dimensional infinity to create, this little life that we then struggle with.
And as you pointed out yesterday, we've been indoctrinated. We've been taught that.
Yeah, of course.
Billy was told that's a fire engine. Only a fire engine.
It's very thoroughly indoctrinated for years and years and years. I mean, talk about brainwashing.
Yeah, we're well rehearsed.
Yeah.
If you go into more, so within the inherent reality or primal consciousness, there is this unbelievable ability to spin doctor and to be creative. And
Absolutely.
Is that the direct cause of why we're so fucked up? We're so into our illusions. And it's almost like so there's going to be something within the inherent nature of what it is.
The being fucked up of samsara is naivety. It's immaturity. Because this looks at itself and goes, wow, this is amazing. And then it goes into itself and sort of it takes the bait and goes into itself, gets sucked into itself. And it's naive enough to get entrapped by its own power. It falls under the sway of its own spells. But as a result of falling under the sway of its own spells, it learns, it develops maturity inherently. And this is the spiritual path. You know, samsara is what teaches liberation. It's finishing school. But as with any education process, you learn by not knowing. The path to learning is not knowing. You're ignorant, and then ignorance becomes the path to learning. It becomes the learning curve. So getting lost in misinterpretation eventually is the stimulus and is the sort of the field of information to develop enough sophistication to learn to be more artful with it and to learn to be able to be with this incredible power of interpretive frameworks, incredible power of imagination, and not get stuck in it. So then you're with it. It's not like it's the enemy. And imagination is the enemy. Let me shut it down. It's not like that. It's be savvy, be hip. Don't be a rude. Don't get sucked in. It's children and Santa Claus. Little children and Santa Claus. Oh, it's great. There is no Santa Claus. You're learning something when you know there is no Santa Claus. You're not naive anymore. And you can still play the Santa Claus game if you want. You can have your kids and say, "Look, Santa's coming. It's Christmas. Oh, what fun!" But you're not trapped in it. You can be with that phenomenon, be with that realm of functioning of reality, but it's no longer entrapping because you have artfulness, you have sophistication, you have wisdom that enables you to see what it actually is, so you don't mistake it.
Thank you.
Regarding training, with this a little more open-minded experience of pain, I get one or two sensations that were different than usual. Something like my skin was melting, whereas what was around, my eyes were more, something like more relaxed. And I was wondering, I'm trying to reconnect with those kind of sensations and get a different perception. What are your thoughts about that?
That's a great field for experimentation. So yeah, with anything, you can any experience you're with, if you're with it intimately, like you were with the pain, it can start to morph and start to sort of reveal different aspects of itself. They can even seem to be radically different, and that can spill over into other concurrent phenomena too. So you're with something here and then something over here also can seem to morph and so on. And the point isn't that that's important, but the point is that you discover then that the flexibility, let's say experienced sensations can be taken many ways simultaneously, is a process of kind of focus, shifted focus. And so things are less linear and less locked into being one way. You can be with it, you discover it's that way, but it's also other ways and other ways and other ways and other ways. And then you notice that if this is that way, then that is that way and that is that way. And things can get much more fluid and flexible. Or be pulled back to sort of a more stable kind of a presentation. This is kind of what I mean by multidimensionality, is that an experienced language is very difficult for this stuff. An experience, call it an energy experience, or the experience of an experiential characteristic, has many ways it can seem to be, depending on sort of how you were with it. It's like this, can look like that, and it can look like that, and it can look like that, and it can look like that, but it's one thing. I'm used to looking at it like this, so it always looks like that. But if I look around and say, oh, it can look different. And so likewise, this is my finger on a chair, and so it's like looking at this always that way. But if I let myself really be with the experience of what is that sensation? you know, in the tingling, and all of a sudden, you know, it can be, like you observed, it can be like kind of a light or music or a space. And, you know, I mean, obviously these words, it's not literally, you know, it's more subtle than that. It's more open-ended than that, but it opens up and can present many different sort of aspects depending on the sort of emphasis of, you know, how you're being with it. I mean, that principle, that fact is is what this is all about. Just that simple. Things are not one way. Things are many, many, many ways. And we're used to sort of basically holding ourselves to be with the more or less one way. I mean, not really. We're actually with things very slippery, but we tend to try and deny it. We tend to try and keep it together. You know, keep it straight. Keep it cool. Keep it handle on things. Remember what everything is. You know, keep it locked in. But actually, the experience is like is morphing in and out. I mean, those of you that have taken psychedelic drugs and other sorts of extreme experience, you know, I mean, that makes it very obvious what that's like. But that's sort of a chemically induced, you know, display of that. But it's exactly the same thing because experience itself is of that nature. It's not particularly coherent. You know, the perceptive, you know, the psychology of perception or whatever is very powerful at being able to enforce a kind of a stability on experience, but experience itself is intrinsically very, very slippery and open-ended and multidimensional, and not particularly this or that, but sort of, you know, smeared all over the place. And we basically consciousness basically can hypnotize itself not to notice that. And all of this is about retraining yourself to be able to notice that, not because that's better, but because that's true. It's real. It's what this really is. And when you see that that's what this really is, the implication of where you are and what this is shifts drastically, inherently. I mean, it's not like you need to figure it out and draw conclusions. You just feel it. You know, it conveys its nature. It conveys its implication directly. Just like you know, if you're used to the locked-in interpretation, I'm in this body, I'm in this life, I'm screwed, I'm stuck in my karma, you know, that becomes something that is felt. It's not an abstract idea. I feel I'm in my body. I feel stuck. I feel, you know, closed into my life. So it's a felt. The implication is somehow of actualized felt, you know, somaticized, whatever. And likewise, exactly the same thing happens when you begin to notice the slipperiness. The implication becomes felt. You feel the openness. You feel the unlimitedness. You feel the multidimensionality. You feel this vastness that you are, that this is, and all of a sudden your Kansas, your normalcy, your life and your body and all this becomes a kind of a relatively small event being displayed in this vast actuality, and you are feeling that vastness. It's a somaticized, you know, it's a felt. The implication is felt. It's not an abstraction that you have to, you know, reason your way to or somehow verify through argument. It conveys itself very, you know, intrinsically.
Is that what they mean sometimes when they refer to that experience as primary or primal? That sure. it doesn't go through an interpretive filter in a sense to then analyze and give meaning to something more than the immediacy of that. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, a lot of this is along the lines of what we've been talking about all morning, which is that, you know, a structure in life is basically created by filtering with the actuality of life, which is a vast, chaotic scatter of infinite information. So in a sense, that is the primal actuality. And constructing structure, constructing order, constructing knowledge, constructing definition, and, you know, having a clue and all this kind of thing is basically a heavy-handed filtering process that the intelligence does, you know, spontaneously. So in a sense, that's less primal and less raw. Although actually it hasn't gone anywhere. It's not like the primal is over here and it's gone somewhere here. This is that. It's just not being seen. It's not being acknowledged.
Yeah, my mind does a technical analogy since I have electronics background as we're like a radio, and if we tune to something and we don't like the music, well, who's forcing us to stay tuned to that?
Exactly.
And if we're wide bandwidth in a sense, and all those stations, all the vibrations, all the phone calls, all the visuals through communications is presently present.
Yeah, exactly so. You know, all the vibrations of the electromagnetic spectrum are all present right here, right now, and that's what you really are. But your perceptive psychology, your perceptive, mentality, whatever, is very skillful at being able to tune, being able to focus it, being able to, now I'm in this station, now I'm in that station, which is all fine, no harm, no foul. The problem is when we forget, when we're very skillful to tuning and we forget there's this vast field of information and we think all that's happening is this damn station is shit. I'm listening to this crappy country music and I wish I could change the station. My life sucks, But and if you are listening to a crappy radio station, that's fine. But if it's arbitrary and you're really the whole bandwidth, it's a different perspective. The implication is very, very different. Mm-hmm. The perceiving consciousness is very heavily censors the actuality, and typically we're not aware of it. So all of this stuff is about letting yourself notice that, letting yourself discover that and become aware of it. And the implication of being able to access, being able to be with the actuality of the less censored version implies a lot more possibility, a lot more, different versions of things, if you will, different, opportunities in terms of what it is and what you are and ways to be with it.
Peter, I know you're not necessarily about any kind of practice. It's more like just notice, just, pretty light. And yet my experience of sitting in particular practices with particular people is that things punch through in a way they don't normally punch through in my everyday life.
Sure. Well, do whatever works. I mean, I'm not anti-practice, but practice is taking anything whatsoever and seeing more and discovering more there. And whether that's in a formal setting of you're sitting and you're doing a ritual and you've bowed and you're this and you're that and you're other, and then you do that, cool. Yeah. But the point is to do that, with or without the accoutrement, with or without, so you're just walking down the street and you're in a car horn honks suddenly and you're startled and all of a sudden you go, wow, this is something here. I mean, that's cool. Or if you're like, you go to a teaching and you sit down and you light a stick of incense and you do a whole, whatever. The point is to have that wow. And you don't need, getting the wow does not depend upon process, but it doesn't exclude process. It can happen in the course of process, so that's all fine. So basically, the point is to get the bang, and it doesn't matter how many bucks are involved or not. The bang can come just bang without any bucks at all, or not, and there can be lots of money exchanged too. That's cool.
It sure seems to be a correlation between the process and the bang.
Well, that's interesting. That could be something to look at. Maybe that becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling hypnotic process too. You're sort of allowing yourself to get the bang because you're in the shoot, of the process. I don't know. I'm speculating here, but it's something you can play with.
I feel like along those lines, you can fully engage in your humanity just for the bang.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be an act of censorship to be feeling fully human.
Because any mode doesn't exclude the whole. You know, the point of all this is if it feels like it excludes the whole, then you can do something about that, but it doesn't have to exclude the whole. I mean, that's kind of what I meant with, I was talking about very sloppily and metaphorically earlier when I said, you don't need to leave Kansas to go to Oz. You just look and you discover Kansas is in Oz. Kansas is Oz. So you don't need to leave your humanity to discover there's more, but your humanity exists in a context of more than humanity. And when you feel that, when you know that, without leaving the humanity is great. I mean, hey, here we are, right?
It's wherever you are is great. And
Yeah.
Yep.
But if it feels like it's not, if you feel stuck, if you feel small, if you feel like, God, here I am in my crappy life, then the point of this is you can look at that and discover that, well, wait a minute, maybe there's more here than I'm letting myself notice. And then that feeling of being stuck or closed or locked into something all of a sudden can seem very different.
well, not to be difficult, but I feel as though I can experience my crappy life as being very rich. Like, that's great crap.
Cool. Well, that's it.
It's got a lot in there, you know, and it can be fully engaging.
Of course. Everything and anything is and can be fully engaging. Absolutely.
And as long as you're not, I guess, feeling when there's a threat, then there's a different quality. I think.
Peter, along the lines of what Pat just brought up, I get this line very often, well, you can't really recognize this or wake up unless you kill the ego or you don't have an ego anymore. And ego is just a function of experience is all it is, or it's just an aspect. So can you speak to that? Because it's not any different than playing human.
Well, ego isn't really ego.
Exactly.
If ego
It's a
seems to be
thought,
ego,
idea.
then you've got a case of something that is something, in which case you can look at it and discover it's more than that.
Right.
Just like if anything seems to be anything, in a limited sense, I mean, if anything seems very specific, seems limited to being just that, then that means you're not seeing that it is actually more than that.
Right.
And that applies to our psychological function, that applies to ego, that applies to sense of self, that applies to personality factors, that applies to personality biases and what we might interpret as neuroses or our psychological deficiencies or quirkiness or what have you. If we're used to coming down on ourselves for our crappy personalities, again, that we're seeing it as being something, which is actually not true, because it's not that that's not there. It's that is there is much more than simply being that interpreted. So ego is not ego. Ego is an inconceivable energy presence manifestation of the totality. And the same with, your personality quirks and your deficiencies and your whatever.
And yet that persists as a myth of like a necessary component to arrive at waking up, is that somehow or other you have to get past the ego somehow.
Right,
As though that's
but-
something concrete
Sure.
and real, or it's a series of experiences. And you cannot do that.
Well, there's all of these kinds of, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do the other. And there's actually only one thing you have to do, and that's see what this actually is.
Yeah.
And you can do that by looking anywhere, see what anything actually is. You can look at this glass and see what it actually is, and you will discover the goal of spirituality. You can look at your ego and see what it actually is, and you discover exactly the same thing. You look at a dog turd on the sidewalk and see what it actually is, you discover the same thing. Because what you're looking at is the nature of experience. And all of these, this, that's, and the others are nothing other than experience. And we forget that, and we think they're this, that, and the other. There's all these things sitting around that we have to somehow sort out and deal with, Whereas in actuality, they're like, you don't have to sort out everything that's in a dream. You just have to see that it's a dream. And then who gives a shit whether it's sorted or not? It self-sorts. So it's a matter of simply seeing what it actually is. And the way to see, of course, is to look. With or without process.
It seems to me you're saying you have the somaticized syndrome. To look at it for its own sake, not with, oh, I want to get rid of this, let me try this.
Yeah. Look at it like unbiasedly. Look at it objectively as much as you can, or just like, what is this phenomenon? Here's a strange phenomenon. Let me examine what it is. And it doesn't mean you need to stop. Say you have a pain, or you've got cancer, or whatever, and you're freaked out about it. You don't need to stop being freaked out about it. It's like there's a phenomenon, and there's being freaked out about it, which is another phenomenon. But let me just look at the phenomena first. Or you can look at the being freaked out about it as a phenomenon. Because of course being freaked out isn't actually being freaked out. It itself is a whole universe of actuality.
It's an expansion of experience.
Yes. So in other words, yeah, it doesn't matter where you look, but the way to look is with unbiased openness, without prejudice.
No purpose.
What energizes our censorship is prejudice. We already think we know what we're going to find, and we look at it expecting to find that, and of course we do, because we're really good at that kind of hypnotic mode. But if you all of a sudden say, wait a minute, maybe I don't know what this is. If I have no idea what this is, what is it that's here? What actuality is it that's here? Letting go of all my previous definition and my previous, whatever. Just like assuming I'm wrong about everything, let me just see what this is. So you try and be as sort of unbiased and neutral and just like a purely objective scientist. Like someone who doesn't care at all about you looking at that phenomenon, just to study it or something like that. Maybe, I mean, that's kind of just the flavor.
But there's never coming to any conclusion either. So.
No, but that's the point. You discover that what is actually there, a conclusion is not a relevant category. Because what it is right. We'll skip that for now. Yes.
Could you also maybe say something about, talking along these lines, how we express or interpret ourselves through, let's say, when we're in a situation that's calls for like a flight or fight response.
Right.
It seems like that there is a point or a beginning where the recognition of some danger occurs, which seems like a bang in a way.
Right.
And then there's some kind of interpretive mechanism that goes on where you're not in that space anymore, but you're kind of determining whether you should fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could kind of speak to, being in that kind of a human situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on what the actuality you're experiencing is, but it's likely that there's kind of like two different things going on simultaneously. One is the actual, your nature and the stimulus that it seems to be present within your experience. And then the other may be the degree to which you're locked into an interpretive framework of what you are and an interpretive framework of what the stimulus and all that is. And those two things kind of are not necessarily very parallel. But in terms of the experience of just being in it, it's can be very difficult or impossible to discriminate them. It just feels like it's all the same thing. So in other words, interpretive frameworks complicate things enormously in terms of what they seem to be. And by interpretive framework, I mean your idea of who you are, your idea of what's going on, your idea of everything. I mean, any idea you have about anything. It's kind of an overlay over your basic nature. You do have a nature. You're not just plain vanilla. You're not just, you know, a total tabula rasa that's just absolutely zero. You have a nature, you have a flavor, you have a kind of an inherent, let's say, inherent modes where given particular stimuli, you will tend to respond in particular ways because that's your nature, whereas another nature would respond differently to the same stimuli. And that's sort of, you know, you can think of that as kind of hardwired maybe, just for the purposes of this analysis or, you know, this particular bullshit. but then, as an overlay to that sort of hardwired nature and stimulus response mode, it can be complicated by if you're particularly heavy-handedly lost in an interpretive framework, where you're interpreting yourself as being this, that, or the other, and you're interpreting your situation as being this, that, or the other, then that can sort of, it throws a complication that sort of modulates the basic nature and the basic sort of hardwired tendency of response into more sort of complexity. And so the actual fight or flight threat situation can be very complex like that. So for example, a person who was relatively free from interpretive frameworks, a person who say had done a lot of good yoga and basically was, you know, was sort of loose and easy. I mean, that's sort of, you know, sort of the cartoon image of the, you know, the Zen master martial arts expert. You know, he's just totally loose and easy. He's not locked into anything. He's just here, he's floating, you know, and all of a sudden some guy comes flying out of the wing to kick his head off and he just goes, blah, blah. Because he's loose, he's spontaneous, so he can just meet that because he's not tied up with, oh, what do I do now? He's not tied up with process. He's not tying up with needing to sort anything out. He's open, he's ready for it, whatever, respond. But then if there's an interpretive overlay where, oh no, I'm me and I'm here and maybe I'm vulnerable and this and that and the other, and there's a whole narration and backstory, then that can serve as a complicating and kind of an inhibiting factor in the whole thing. All of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm being attacked, what am I gonna do? Oh, let me see, I better do this move and that move. And all of a sudden there's a lot of process seemingly involved. So, I mean, you know, this is just sort of loose discussion. You know, it's all a matter of what the actuality is. But, you know, in the practicalities, in terms of what I recommend is this yoga, this kind of ongoing sensitivity training, it's best to exercise it where it's simple and easy. So when you're not in a high stress situation, or you're not, you know, it's easiest to do the yoga when you're hanging out sometime, relaxed, nothing an hour, and you just, you know, look at something or whatever. Not when you're like in a high pressure situation and there's a lot coming on you and a lot hangs in the balance and you're, you know, all torqued up and stressed out. You can, it's possible to look at that and discover what's really good, but you're making it, you're sort of a worst case. It's a worst case scenario. It's like having a math test. You can ask the student what's 2 + 2. You can ask them to do a complex calculus integration. They're both just simple math problems, but the one is like a lot more demanding than the other. You know, it's a bigger because again, you know, in practical terms, the wonderful thing about this process of this yoga, as I call it, is that if you do it anywhere, it applies everywhere else. So if you do it where it's easy, it applies where it's complex. So if you make progress, you know, being with simple visual phenomena or just simple anything, any simple experiential phenomena, and you become good at sort of noticing, wow, this is really open, this is really an interesting multidimensional phenomena that's hard to lock down. Then in these other more complicated situations, you'll discover they automatically go into the same kind of openness and more possibilities seem available. And more, you know, it's not that you're less locked into subconsciously thinking, oh, it's this way or it's that way. You have a whole bunch of free floating hypotheses, and you can have more sort of random access and more freedom to sort of be spontaneous and be artful with it. So you can work where it's easy, and it applies where it's hard. It's not like you need to work where it's hard.
Where would instinct fit in that dynamic? Instinct, is that more of an immediacy, or does it have this subtle interpretive thing that happens with it? Or
what we mean by that word, I think, includes both. I mean, I think with our ideas of words, we're kind of sloppy. I mean, instinct can be one the more basic, the more fundamental, just inherent nature, or it can also be a kind of a complicated thing, I suppose. I don't really know. I mean, it depends on what, the problem with these notions and the problem with these words is they're very sloppy. They're not very precise.
like, I'm thinking of an animal and self-preservation instinct.
Well, an animal.
A less complex fight or flight.
Well, and let's not talk about an animal. Let's talk about you.
Right, but I'm sometimes an animal.
Okay. Suppose that.
Really,
Okay. Let's get concrete here. Suppose a really, really bad driver takes the wrong turn, drives into the parking lot, drives around the side of the building, drives up the stairs, and drives through these doors, and is about to hit you. What happens? What do you feel? What do you do?
I do what I can to avoid an impact.
Yeah, instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So what would that be? Would that be, you wouldn't sit and think about it.
No.
You wouldn't think about, what am I? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think that would bypass. I think that would bypass the thinking process.
Exactly. So it's just you're responding according to your nature. Mm-hmm. And different people's nature has different degrees of functionality in different ways. Some people have, you might say different inherent strengths or different inherent talents. Some people are more physically oriented. Some people are, more, whatever. It's absurd to try and categorize it, of course. But again, you bring your inherent strengths to bear on an immediate intuitive solution to a situation without stopping to think about it. And you can say that's instinct. Yeah, sure.
Just like a master of Tai Chi does the slow motion martial art. He could be sitting there calmly and deflect something, his calmness,
Yeah, of course. These kinds of things we're talking about, it's approaching it from a kind of a sloppy angle. The way all phenomena actually occur is kind of direct energy resonance. There's no thing that does something else that interacts with something else, because there's actually no things. There's actually no object. There's energy patterns, and the energy patterns appear synchronistically with each other according to a kind of resonance. And of course, that sounds like gibberish, because it is gibberish, because it's undescribable. So the way things work is not a mechanical or causal or even physical. And that even applies, a primate running out of the way of an oncoming vehicle. Because the vehicle isn't really a vehicle, the primate isn't really a primate. It's a resonant energy system that can be interpreted as looking like a primate in a vehicle, but in actuality, it's something beyond space and time, this weird stuff that I call radiance. And of course, that's the point, to become aware of this actuality, moving towards being aware of it in that context. But every step is that. So, you by instinct jumping out of the way of the car is just another way of saying, the resonant patterns within the waves beyond space and time. It's just different ways of parsing the same thing. When I say, when you say, gosh, I got up and I went and had, some coffee and then got in the car and drove down here and set up my stuff and sat down and we started to have a talk. That's one way of describing the same event that I could describe as saying, transcendental radiance beyond space and time, shown with fractal interactions with itself, and nothing happens. Two ways of describing exactly the same event. And neither is truer than the other. They're just like from a certain perspective, it can be seen that way, from a certain perspective, it can be seen that way. And it's not that it's really this or it's really that. There's no really. It's like, is an electron, a particle, or a wave? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Is matter or energy? Well, it depends on how you look at it. So it's kind of a both and situation where any way of describing it is fine, is true as any other way, from the perspective in which it seems to be that, which is arbitrary. Is this glass square or round? Well, it's sort of square, it's sort of a rhomboid thing, but if I made a mess and tipped it sideways, you'd say, oh, the glass is round. So it's square from certain perspectives, it's round from certain other perspectives. It's both and situation, So is there cause and effect in space and time and matter and interaction and yeah, sure, from a certain perspective. From another perspective, there's no space, there's no time, there's no causality. And that's not literally. And that's not truer or less true than the other way of putting it. They're two different views of the same thing, and they're two viable, real, actual views of the real, actual same thing.
Now, how can those two views coexist in the same time?
It's like Newtonian physics and quantum mechanics are two different descriptions of the same thing. But they're looking at it from a different degree of approximation, different degree of precision, maybe. So, in quantum mechanics, this is like a probability field. Where this is like, you could look at it as, there's a certain finite probability that any particular atom in this glass is actually 3 miles that way at any moment, right? In quantum mechanics, that's literally true. And identity mechanics, in Newtonian mechanics, they're both true. The glass is here. But the glass being here means also that this atom could be 3 miles that way. Okay. So it's different perspectives, different degrees. You could say different levels of understanding of the same phenomenon.
I get the feeling when I go to trying to make a story in a way that I can share what's happening for me in words to someone else.
Yes.
So never share.
You can, yeah. Some people are like that. Some people are very quiet. You see someone that doesn't talk much and they stay quiet. It doesn't mean they don't have. Maybe they have a richer, bigger experience. They don't want to go to the trouble of making it seem small to put it out to somebody. No, of course, that's the same thing. That's just like quantum mechanics. When the atom is by itself, it's everywhere. But as soon as it has to communicate itself, all of a sudden it's here or there. Yeah, no, we feel this, right? You experience it, and we do this in terms of what we've been talking about today. Mainly, we do this to ourselves in terms of our perception. Our experience is really this big, vast, huge, amazing, infinite sphere, smear. But psychologically, we sort of collapse it to an event where, we're sitting in a room talking and then we're going to have lunch. And so there's a way of kind of simplifying it to sort of, for describability. But we describe it to ourselves that way. And we forget we're doing it. So if you think it really is the little version, you're cheating yourself. You can do that. You don't have to deprive yourself of the big version. You can have them both. Just remember that when you do that, it's arbitrary.
It's like the little version is taking more room than the big version.
That's funny, Why don't we take a 5-minute break? We've been shooting along here for a while. We'll have lunch in a little bit. sorry.
That's really the days in.
Oh,
I saw that some foundation, I guess, refunded a live cam on a beach in Alaska, thousand pound walrus.
Oh,
Big
cool.
bus. So you can go live 24/7.
Walrus cam.
Yeah, walrus. Looks like that. Walrus cam. So I hang out with the walruses for a while.
People are really into that.
Good you?
I didn't go yet. They had like a YouTube video. A couple of minutes. On YouTube.
Alicia Delara.
Welcome back. Such as it is.
I was thinking about the experience of humanity, and I'm going to try and formulate my thoughts. So, if sensing something and the immersion in the sensation and the wow that you get from total immersion is something that we speak about in a positive way, I'm just wondering if the people that are totally immersed in their humanity and every second is about the body and the situations that they're in and the appearance, the reality as it appears to them, but they're totally immersed in that. Like, that might have a quality that is really similar to what we're seeking, it seems like. If it's a total immersion.
Yeah, being lost in delusion is total immersion.
Yeah.
Being lost in craziness and complete misinterpretation, it can be total immersion, for sure.
Yeah, so in a way, it's very similar in some way.
But you're always totally immersed in your experience. There's no way around it. You know, the question is exploring how limiting that is, and if it seems to be limiting or limited, is it really, and does it need to be? And if you enjoy it being limited, that's great. Have at it. You know, it's like, let me in jail. I want to be locked up. Cool. Hey, you know, have at it.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
Some people would.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. You know, there's consciousness can be with the reality of its experience any way that it's capable of doing so, and does. And the question, you know, the topic of this weekend is a very specialized perspective of exploring the possibilities and the options available in that. It's not that, oh, this is better, or this is worse, or everyone should be here, or let's go out to the street corners and tell everyone to come here and listen to this stuff because they need to know it because it's better. It's no better or worse. It's just different. It's for people who are interested in looking into expanding their perspectives on what they think they are and finding out if that's possible and how to do it, then that's an interesting topic. But it's only interesting because they're interested in it. So it's appropriate for them to spend time with that if they, you know, because they want to.
Okay.
But it's not like, oh, everyone should be, you know, anything like that. So it's all good. It's all good. You know, it's like, I mean, one way to look at it is you can, I mean, not as a value judgment, but you can look at it as different stages of maturity. And it's quite appropriate for life forms to be with their experience according to their level of maturity. You know, it would be absurd to go into a kindergarten class and tell them all to go out and get a job and, you know, and straighten out politics and the CEOs or something, because with their level of maturity, that's not appropriate engagement. You know, it's not a good mix. It's appropriate for children to be children. It's appropriate for people who are, you know, invested in their lives to be invested in their lives. It's appropriate for people who are retiring from their lives and sort of reflecting on it all to do that, and so on and so forth. And likewise, in sort of spiritual terms, people who are, you know, really invested in their experience and you know, going into it with full credibility and full giving it a lot of importance. That's great. And for people that are more philosophically inclined, do they find themselves in a question saying, well, what are the options here? What are the alternatives? What's really going on here? You know, I'm used to doing it this way, but is it possible to do it other ways? What are the options? Then in that case, that becomes an interesting question, and you can look into it. But it's not that it's better to do that or worse. It's just a different mode.
Can you give any more information on what you mean by maturity? Because I would say that I know what you mean, but I want to hear more.
Well, it's just an arbitrary way to look at it. It's not necessarily true. You know.
Because that implies time, a timeline and doing, I think. I don't
Sure.
know.
Well, I don't know what it implies, but you know, you can say empirically, the whole notion of an arc of maturing seems relevant. We see it across the board, both biologically, we see it sociologically, and we see it in kind of the spiritual terms of the nature of the way a consciousness wants to be with its experience. And those don't necessarily correlate. It's not like younger people are always more spiritually immature, older people are more spiritually mature. They're kind of like arcs that each have their own, like biorhythms or something, where they aren't necessarily in sync with each other. And whether or not there's time, you know, it's observable that there, you know, for example, in the course of the life form of any individual, you can observe a generalized kind of arc of, at first they're an infant and then they go through a period of developing of their skills and developing of their functionality in a social situation and physically and so on and so forth. And then they go into a period of generally mature adulthood where they're fully invested in, you know, in manifesting life and participating in society and breeding perhaps or whatever, these various things. And then at a later phase, they become less interested in that and they withdraw from that and they enter retirement. Perhaps they're more reflective or they take up drinking or whatever they do, right? And so this is just sort of a generalization, but it's something that we can see, you can see it again and again across the board. So without trying to pin down what it is, you can say, well, there's some kind of a pattern that's sort of like that. And you can see a similar pattern in terms of what we might think of as spiritual interest, where certain people at various ages in life have no interest whatsoever. And you know, they just want to live their life. You know, don't give me this philosophy crap, you know. I want to make money and I want to have friends and I want to go out and have a good time or whatever, right? Great, okay, cool. And for people that are in that phase of orientation of their experience, that's great. It's appropriate for them to be that because that's where they are, you know. But then some people at various stages of life, young people too, not just older people, are more reflective and philosophical, and you're thinking, what's going on here? What is this? What a strange thing this life is. What a strange thing this world is. And people that are in these other phases look at them and say, what are you talking about? Come on, you know, don't be an idiot. Go out and have some fun, live your life. And these people are sitting there going, yeah, but what's going on? What's it all mean? You know, and for people like that, then this kind of inquiry becomes interesting because it's a potential, you know, vehicle for exploring, for addressing some of those issues, maybe. But again, it's relevant for them because it's relevant for them because of where they happen to be. You know, whether or not
you're calling maturing.
Yeah, whether or not it's actually maturing, or whether or not
It's
that's
just
just a
another
way.
word that describes the place that people are leading.
It's a kind of a map. You know, it's kind of a way of mapping it, and who knows what it really is, or even if it really is. It's just a way of thinking of it that kind of sort of makes sense in a way.
it almost seems like, because it's a building upon.
Yeah.
Like, similar to when you said you try, I can't remember exactly what you said, on the small things, you practice with the small things.
Right.
And then when you're in the big thing, you'll already have
Right.
that impetus.
Sure. And again, we experience this in all aspects of our functionality, right? You know, you build upon your experiences as a child and your functioning as an adult or a teenager or whatever. So there, you know, there's this, I mean, the whole sort of learning curve, the whole, what seems to be a development or an accumulation of skillfulness, you know, we all experience that in all facets of our being. You know, my behavior and my functioning right now is very different than my behavior and functioning was when I was 1 year old. It can look like a kind of an accumulation or development or building on experience that learning, whatever. But again, that's, who knows what it actually is, but that's a way of seeing it that seems to, you know, be a kind of a useful mapping of it. But, you know, I think it's important to understand, to emphasize that there's no value or judgment or assessment implicit in this. Being immature isn't worse than being mature, spiritually or in any way. Kindergartners are not worse than adults or old folks, and vice versa. You know, it's just different phases of development. Or their nature is appropriate to that phase, and there you have it.
But just to be, a pain, it would be I'm just saying, I don't really mean it, it would be the mature person who says that being immature is not any more valuable than being mature. But the immature person,
Sure. That's
whatever
part
that means, whatever.
Sure, that's part of
indicates.
a sign of maturity, is having a more broad view, a more broad perspective.
So then we come right back to some mature means something.
But that's not better. It just means a different mode of functioning. More naivety or immaturity tends to imply a focused tunnel vision, or a narrower view, a narrower perspective, which can imply different. You know, the broader your perspective, the more generous you are in being able to include the different modes. Whereas if you have a very narrow perspective, I mean, if you're just a hardcore punk rocker and that's all you are, then classical music sucks, and anyone that listens to it is an asshole, right? Whereas if you're, you know, if you were a punk rocker when you were a kid, and you've been a musician all your life, or been into music, and you've heard all different kinds of music, and you've heard classical music and ethnic music and all these amazing things, and they each have their own value in their own way. And you still kind of like some things better than other things. Hey, why not? But still, in all, you have a broader view. And yeah, punk rock, I get why people really like it. There's some fun things there. It's a fun energy, you know. But there's other kinds of fun energy that are good too. Or a sophisticated palate, you know. You have a little child who only wants to eat vanilla pudding, right, or cookies or whatever, right? But no asparagus, right? And then as you mature, you know, all of a sudden you try different things. You try ethnic cooking, you try different spices, and you appreciate, wow, there's a really broad range. They each have their kind of value. You may still kind of prefer various things, but by and large, you may tend to have a broader range of things that you find interesting. But this is just, you know, you can see this across the board in terms of this kind of spectrum of maturing, that this kind of a broadening of perspective seems to be an aspect of that. But again, you know, who knows? It's very empirical. It's just sort of a generalized observation that you can see things this way, and it seems to hold true pretty much. Not that it matters.
We've talked about this before, so well, maybe just expanding upon it. So it's like everything is being presented instantaneously, you know, instantaneous presentation of reality. And I guess what it seems to be, and here's one thing you talk about quite a bit, is it seems to be doing itself. I mean, it just is here and it's doing itself, and that's helped, you know, I guess me to see that what I am, there's actually such a limited ability, but this is really the question, because I'm not informed this, or there's such a limited ability for me to change what's already here. It's like scratching in a mountain or something. It's like, here's this huge, vast presentation of experience. And I can get up and move my body a little bit, which I don't understand how that happens. Oh, it's almost, everything is so vast and it's presenting by itself. My whole body's being presented by itself. And it's like I have this little movement, it seems, but I don't know if I'm perceiving that right, or could you help?
It's arbitrary. You can certainly see that all experiential detail appears in the instant, objectively, let's say. It's just, here it is. So you could say spontaneously, you could say it just appears. And this applies to everything, things that we qualify as subjective, things that we qualify as objective. Your thoughts and your emotions just appear in the instant, just the way, your sensory experience appears in the instant, and it just is the way it is. And it's not like you get a review process where you get to see, well, let's see, in 3 minutes, I'm going to be thinking this thought. Do I want to or not? No, I think I don't want to. I'm going to think a different thought. It's not like that. It's too late. You're already thinking what you're thinking. And then you're thinking this, and then you're thinking this, and it's like this ongoing wave, right? But I think it's an oversimplification to necessarily mean that everything is passive to something else, and that you're just being done like a puppet on a string, because there's this very strange property of participation. The intelligence that is experiencing this and let's say is dancing with this phenomenon, there's a participatory aspect to it. And not that you can make sense of what that is or how it works or how much of it is or what, but to just have a simplistic aspect that all I am is some plain vanilla observer of all sorts of stuff that is just happening by itself. And I'm completely passive and neutral to that. I mean, yeah, you can see it that way, but there's not necessarily the sole evidence. That aspect of things is interpretable, but also there is this strange sense of interpretation. I move my hands and I feel like I'm moving them. Now maybe that's just appearing, and maybe the feeling that I'm moving is just appearing, but still in all there's a sense of participation, and that's interesting. So it's not necessarily a simple black or white thing, and what it exactly is more a question mark than this or that.
And what struck this whole thought process some weeks ago is the eye at the top of the stupas, or even the dollar bill. It's the all-seeing. Am I just the observer? And it's like, well, yeah, so much is being presented on its own. It seems without me, whatever. All these things are just, and so. But yeah, here. But
to create a polarity where there's an observer and an observed and some disconnect between them is very arbitrary. There is certainly the symbol of that eye. There is certainly this, everything is observed, but everything is also appearing. And there's no reason to identify any less with that than with the observing. You are what is observing, but perhaps you are also what is appearing. And so you're doing all of it. Maybe not a you that's a you, your psychological you or your personality you. Maybe it's a you that is, a you that is this, a you that is the full system, that is beyond being the mere personality, the mere human, the mere temporal incarnation or what have you. So in that level, in a certain sense, it could be completely participatory. Like in the slice of a dream. You can be in a dream and you can have a feeling of not being able to change anything. And yet in actual fact, you're creating everything. Right? So, in other words, the way it feels is not necessarily the way it is.
For me, it's like the very first time it seems to be a continuous process. This morning, I just felt I was engaging more continuously with that.
Wonderful.
And you said, if something appears to be limited to something, then that's an interesting next thing to engage with.
Yeah.
And I did do, and I'm amazed. I mean, I'm amazed that this is where the openness is.
Yeah.
This is very not intuitive.
It's counterintuitive. We're used to thinking escapism. We're used to thinking the openness is, if this is here, then the openness is there. But it's the other way around. It's in the most specific that you find the most openness. Yeah, it is counterintuitive. I mean, I think to a general, to normal mindset. When you go into things more closely, you're more free of them. And I think in terms of human psychology, it's very normal to have a kind of escapist notion that, let me get away, we get away from this stuff. But when you get away, you're actually more stuck with it. Because you're getting away from it makes it makes your interpretation of what it seems to be more stable because you're not challenging it. Whereas when you are intimate with it, it can't hide. It can't pretend to be just a simple whatever. All of a sudden you're with what's really there, and oh my God, you see what it really is. Experience is so slippery, and it becomes very obvious.
It's like a horizon. I mean, you go there and it's again opened, and it's. But so are we a little attracted by these closeness or whatever it is?
Yes, it's funny, isn't it? It's perversion. But human psychology seems to be very threatened by openness and seems to be attracted by its version, my version of things. I want my world. This is my way. I know what's going on. Is this? And you say something else, I disagree with you. I defend it. Because I want it to be little. I want it to be mine. And this stuff is very impersonal. All of a sudden, you go into this stuff and you don't know who you are. You don't know where you are. And all of a sudden, so it becomes a very different sort of a game, a very different scenario. Which is, it's a little unnatural to our normal psychology that we've developed over the course of our lives. Because we're sort of developing our stronger ego, as we're growing up, not necessarily in a bad sense or in a neurotic sense, but in the sense of, just more of a sense of, well, I know who I am. I've been in life a long time. I sort of know what things are. I'm a pretty clever guy, and so but then I look at experience and maybe I don't know. Maybe that all of that is there. My psychological self and my psychological history is there, but it's sitting here in this field that is more than that. It's outside of that. And you can take that as threatening. I mean, many people do. It's like, a lot of people start looking at this spirituality stuff, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, you're going to take the world away from me. You're going to take time and space away from me. That's frightening. It's terrifying because there's a feeling of needing to be oriented, and the implicit orientationlessness of what this seems to be when you let yourself really look at it can be, a little scary. But again, of course, when you get used to it, you discover you don't lose anything. You don't lose your psychological self. You don't, like I said this morning, it's not like you need to leave Kansas to go to Oz. You just discover that Kansas is in Oz. So your personal self and your psychological self and your historical self is in this amazing, strange situation. And that's very interesting. But it's not like that means that there's no implication of you need to, sell everything and give your clothes away and live in the mountains or something. You can if you want, right?
In terms of when you talk, you say, you describe a being which could be me. I have a life and I've experienced things and I find I have a certain degree of intelligence, etc. And when you say that, if I look in actuality, it's like my personality seems to interact with that, with the words you say, with the words people say, and that seems to be something.
Sure.
And then I go closer, and that.
Sure, because even that's the same thing. Even our personality isn't really a personality. you can do noticing on anything. It's not just sensory experience. You can look at psychological experience too, and you find exactly the same thing. What it is what it is, but it's not what you think, but you're used to thinking it is. And so when you look, all of a sudden it opens up and becomes more than you thought. But it doesn't stop being what it is. It just becomes more. It opens to more. So you don't lose it. You just gain more. And after one gets a certain amount of experience in discovering this, I'm getting more, but I'm not losing anything, then the fear of it falls away and it stops being threatening or scary, and you don't think, oh no, I'm gonna go crazy, how can you do this stuff? Then it's just, okay, well, this is really interesting. It's kind of fun too,
When I go to action, I think there is a restriction of my film. Is that something that...
In what way?
I have to think I'm going to speak right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got the feeling that it's difficult to remain connected with more than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in my experience, everything I do something and not just stay or...
No,
I feel that's restriction.
I understand. But it's more like a focus. Just because you're focused doesn't mean you lose the field. The field is there is an aspect of the focus. It's just not explicitly in the focus. A cloud is a manifestation of the whole sky, the whole pressure, temperature, humidity conditions of the whole atmosphere. But the cloud looks like it's right here. But it's actually connected to and a part of the conditions in the whole field. And likewise, so now I'm speaking with you, but it's not like I need to leave everything I'm not saying just because I'm saying what I'm saying. See what I mean? So that's all here too, but I'm not saying it. But what I am saying is part of that. So in other words, when you are pulling out of focus, doesn't mean you're losing or separating from the unfocused or the continuum, let's say. It's not a dichotomy. But I understand that. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon. It's always interesting when needing to say something. I can think of a topic and I can think of it sort of very multidimensionally, like this big cloud, and it's very interesting and very juicy. And then I try to say, but what would I say about it? And then I put these words together and it comes out this small little thing. And I think that doesn't really capture it. It doesn't capture it, but it indicates it. If I'm artful with it, it can indicate it. Like a poem, or the few words it can say more than it's saying, even though it's not saying with the words, but there's more, they're there just by the feeling of it somehow. I don't know, but it's an issue. It is an issue, and it's an interesting phenomenon. Like in these talks are a perfect example. I know what I want to present. I know it very intimately, very clearly, very fully. And then I look at what I say, and I say, and I say, how well did these? If I take everything, all these words that I've been saying, like say in the morning in 2 hours, I take all these words I've been saying, sort of taking with this and this, and we talked about that and talked about. I'm trying to talk about this, and I say this and this and this and this and this, But if I'm artful, there is some conveyance of it to some degree, and the thing is that the person I'm talking to hopefully can encode that and re-expand it. Like like getting the sense of something. So it's like a code. It's like an encoded version of a lot of information encoded in little information, but an artful listener can take that little information and re-expand it, you know, hopefully, or not. Maybe a lot of times not so much.
But if that's true, that means we have common nature.
Well, that's the assumption. You know, I do this work on the assumption that you actually exist and you're more or less like me. I don't know that. But it seems to be somewhat true because I notice that something seems to happen in this work that I've been doing. And that would be consonant with that. You know, but again, that's more sort of theoretical. Who knows?
It also has to do with the fact that language and communication is also more another. That the words
are
like
more than words. Words aren't really words.
They're not the little hieroglyphs
No.
that you put together. They're packed with inconceivably with meaning somehow.
Yeah.
They point outside of themselves right away.
Yeah, the part contains the whole.
Yeah.
It's all fractal. So, you know, the little bit is the big bit.
Right.
It's just, you know. And again, really that depends on the artfulness. In communication, it depends on the artfulness of the speaker and of the listener.
Right. You got to pack the Trojan horse, but I have to open up the door and let the soldiers go.
Or at least let it into your citadel.
Exactly.
And hopefully the soldiers will take care of themselves.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in terms of communication, or any kind of action, really, you know, this really gets into the nature of intelligence is so fractal. Intelligence doesn't rely on form. Intelligence is a vast system, and any form is an aspect of that system. So the whole system sort of comes with each form. And that's really what we're talking about noticing, really. I mean, that's what this yoga is noticing that when you look at any experience, you know, when you see what's actually there, you go, whoa, this is amazing intelligence, which is inclusive of everything, you know, in a way that you can't possibly explain or make sense of. But it's the same with communication, it's the same with action. So it looks like you're doing something little, but it's not really little, because the littleness is like a hologram of all the bigness is coming along with it.
Yeah, but how is that different from the time where I'm stuck in the stories?
Well, it isn't. It isn't different. When you're stuck in the stories, you're not really stuck in the stories. You really think you are. It's very crazy. You're never stuck. Stuckness is the fantasy of being stuck.
Yeah, I can feel a difference between the two.
Well, it does feel different because you don't let yourself have availability. When you feel stuck, you don't let yourself feel the availability of alternatives. It's not, but you have them. You just don't let yourself feel them. It's like you keep creating the stuckness, creating the smallness. You know, it's like being in a big open field and saying, I'm in a little room, I'm in a little room, I'm in a little room. You're in a big open field, but you keep saying, I'm in a little room, I'm in a little room, I'm in a little room, but you're putting it there. But you have to keep putting it there. But if you look around, it's like, well, you know, I mean, that's part of the strangeness of spirituality, of spiritual discovery, is you look around at your small world and you discover it's not really a small world. You don't change it, you don't get rid of it. You just look at it and discover it's not really that. You know, it's like, you know, I'm stuck in a wall. You know? But then I look at what it is, I'm not really stuck in it. I can still do this. I haven't gone anywhere, but it's not really that. So it's not about changing what it is. It's about seeing what it is. And when you see what it is, you see you don't need to change it because it's not really entrapping. It's not really little. just because you're used to thinking of it as little. The problem is the interpretation that it is little, not that it actually is little and you need to get outside of it. So it's very convoluted. It's insanity. It's literally insanity. It's thinking something that is not the case is the case, and it becomes because you believe it. It makes it true. It actually is that way because you're making it that way, but you don't know you're making it. You think it is.
Which can become a field of investigation all by itself, just watching that take place.
Oh yeah.
You can. There's the field of stars, and there's the Big Dipper. A Big Dipper, small. Field of stars. Big Dipper. Big Dipper.
Oh yeah.
And that palpable.
And that mechanism never goes away.
Yeah.
As you develop spiritually, so to speak, you're still this crazy fuck. You're still this stupid, neurotic person you've always been. I'm speaking for myself. I know you all are much better than that. But you're looking at it with bemusement because you're seeing what it is.
Yeah.
And the point is not to change it. The point is not to get rid of anything. The point is just to see what it is.
Yeah.
And when you see what it is, it just happens to turn out that you'll be free of it.
Right.
Because you are free of it already.
Yeah.
You never were not free of it. It's not entrapping. It's just there.
And fun.
Yeah, it turns out to be fun. It turns out to not just not matter, but actually be a downright plus.
Yeah.
Peter, over the arc of maturity, spiritual maturity, of being with reality, how for me, I know it's still an effort. It doesn't come. I mean, sometimes it'd be easier, sometimes, but mostly more difficult. Whatever I gotta be in the right mode, whatever. But for yourself, or just through the arc of maturity, does it just come more natural with ease? It just becomes the natural.
Yeah, it becomes more and more. It becomes more and more the normalcy. Your normalcy recalibrates. Mm-hmm. And I think if you looked at your normalcy now, and you could accurately remember precisely your mental state, say 10 years ago, I think you would notice a big difference. And this can be very interesting too, because it can be very difficult to self-assess, because you always feel like you, and you always feel like you. So it seems like everything's the same as it always has been. But again, if you look at if I remember my state of mind 20 years ago, it was radically different than it is now. But it doesn't. I wouldn't really notice that unless I'd make the effort to try and figure it out. So it's very difficult to self-assess where you are, so to speak, in terms of spiritual progress, if that was even relevant. Because it always feels like normal. It's just like, well, here I am, it's Sunday and we're doing this, and soon I'm getting hungry, so we're going to go to lunch, and it's just like, which is kind of like the way it's always been. It's kind of like the way it was when I was a teenager, right? But then if I look at, well, wait a minute, what is sort of the feeling tone of what this is here, what this system is here, and it's like, wow. I mean, what this world feels to me as being is so drastically different than what the world felt to me to be maybe 40 years ago or something. But I don't notice, because you don't notice because the change comes gradually, and it's always just, well, here you are, same as always.
Sometimes too, thank you for that. I think also it's like, you become more sensitive, so it's like you judge yourself. When you're distracted. You develop some sensitivity, and then
as you develop more openness,
worse about yourself.
Exactly. As you develop more openness, let's say, you develop more sensitivity too, and so you notice more critically how closed you are.
That's it.
It's very
ways to beat yourself up.
Yeah, it's kind of like a horizon. You can be really traveling far, but the far horizon is still always way over there, and the past horizon is still way over there. And it's like, well, I haven't moved, the horizon's still there, and yet there can be major motion.
So you say it's very gradual, and I experienced that. I'm going to ask a why question, but why then do masters, including you, sometimes use a different wording, which is not so gradual, as if there was some sort of big change, or is it another arbitrary thing that we're speaking of the same?
It's both and. You know, it is gradual, but it can also be sort of quantum jumps. You know, but it's.
I mean, that to me that has emphasized in the past an expectation that okay, there's something to look for. And
Right. No, exactly. This can be a big mistake. You know, you read about some great spiritual master who had some experience, and the world exploded, and God came down and carried them into heaven or something, and saying, "Well, that didn't happen to me." so I must be, I must be a schmo. I must be doing it wrong. But that's a big mistake. Part of that can be sloppiness of communication. There's a lot of different ways to describe things. You know, I can say, wow, this is unbelievable, incredible, infinity beyond space and time. Or I can say, here, we're hanging out here and we'll do lunch in 20 minutes. And they're both true. There's different ways of describing the same thing. So some of that can be sort of the liberty of how poetic you want to be and how you're putting things. But there is, insight builds, and insight can also come in flashes, and it's not an either or.
Might just be marketing too.
Well, sure, yeah, it's all kinds of, there's all different aspects, but it's a mistake to take things as being this or that.
Yeah, we might have the big insight, but we immediately then say, oh, it wasn't so big or whatever. Where someone else will say, oh my God, I had this big insight.
Who knows?
The world changed.
But I think basically it's a mistake to even worry about, progress or assessment. The point is to be it in real time, and don't worry about trying to look at it from outside and assess it or judge it or, be your own biographer. Spirituality is the most incredible, astounding, important, big thing that there is. And at the same time, it's absolutely no big deal. So, just how it is. It's just the same old thing.
And that's the big insight, ironically. Yes.
Well, yeah. The big insight is that there's no big insight.
I'm a genius.
No, it's I would say it's definitely very specifically true that realization is a discovery that there's no realization, and yet it is an actual bona fide discovery. It's a certain clear realization that there is no realization, and yet it is the realization of that.
Yeah.
It's so fun. Yeah, I mean, the big thing is it's what it's always been.
Yeah. I mean, and that's
it's always been just this.
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone who I know several people who I recognize as realize, and it's exactly the same thing for them. I've always been this. This is what this always is. I was just, making it so complicated and coming down on the whole thing and myself and everything, just totally insanely. It's just like, well, just this weird experience that is just this weird thing, and here it is, and you're clueless, and weird shit happens, and then it's lunchtime. I keep saying it's lunchtime. Must be almost
It's the
lunchtime.
one constant.
It's a lot about just relaxing, get off your high horse, just, hey, this is just, here's reality. It's like always.
It's almost like that, well, it's always, it's not like something new started, it's like something old stopped in a way.
Yeah, it is, I think that's one thing I would say that gives credence to the whole ego loss thing is that, ignorance in big part is self-importance. Whatever, even if your self-image is largely negative, even if you're coming down on yourself and just thinking about it, God, I hate myself, I wish I was someone else, whatever that is, it really matters. And that mattering is a concrete that sets it in stone and makes it into something. It makes everything hard and solid and stiff and just sort of, letting go of that arrogance or discovering having that self-importance just fall away. Well, yeah, I am the way I am, but it doesn't really matter. Everything's the way it is. It just doesn't really matter. All of a sudden, the pressure's off and the tension's off, and somehow in that everything just sort of
feels like an
opens. Everything opens, and it's just all diaphanous and ghostly and luminous and
which is what it had been the whole time when you were off pretending
it always was, but I was making a big deal of it because I was an asshole. I'm still an asshole, but so what? It's really, spiritual. Pino, my friend Pino told me this. His sort of paradigm was parapsychology, because back in those days in the early 60s, that was sort of the coming thing, and he was not at all versed in spiritual stuff or Indian masters or yoga or any of that shit. He was, his paradigm was that he was psychic,
right,
and he was being tested by these scientists and stuff. But anyway, he once said to me, parapsychology is 90% psychology. And to me, the message of that is right on the money. Spirituality is really all about psychology. It's discovering sanity. It's moving from insanity to insanity, which is moving from self-importance to who you're kidding. Just let go of it, kind of thing. But anyway.
It just because in the marketplace, as we wander through the spiritual marketplace, and you hear, Peter was on Pino's back deck and the veil got lifted, and so you can't help, the mind wants to put that into a before and after, and sure enough, it is, but at the same time, like you're saying, it's actually, it's not that condition either. It's a normalcy is revealed.
It's so befuddling when you try to get it from descriptions, because you read, yoga and then the chakras and these energy bodies and other dimensions and all, and that's true if you understand what they're talking about, or it's no big deal. That's true if you understand what it's talking about. All these things they're all true, and they seem so different. It seems like there's different. It's like it's like the elephant and the blind man. It's all these descriptions are of such different things. Like, how could they possibly be the same thing? And yet they are. Right. That's part of what makes this all so befuddling, because what this is so slippery and so multidimensional that you can describe it in completely contrary ways and have them all be accurate descriptions from within their perspective.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why I recommend just, rather than worrying about trying to make sense of it or worrying about descriptions or paradigms, just go to experience itself and look how slippery it is. And once you notice that for yourself firsthand, all of a sudden you get that, wow, this is just describable in all kinds of different ways. And they're all, none of them are untrue.
Right.
They're all inaccurate. None of them are comprehensive, but they're all none of them are any really truer than any other, even though they're so different. So it sort of depends on your choice of hyperbole and into what kind of way you're going to put it.
Right.
The slipperiness of it is the real telling factor, the unresolvability, that things are not simply any one dull, linear, stable way. Everything is very, very, very slippery and dynamic, and you can't pin it down as being this or that. And that's the key right there. That once you get that, all the rest of it and all the chaos and all that makes perfect sense. Because of course, all these descriptions and making sense of it in the way I think about it and the way I relate to it is all just all over the place. Because it's just like, it's nothing. It's nowhere. It's nothing in particular, you know. But when you see that for yourself, then it all makes sense. It's like, oh yeah.
I feel like what you're saying is, the only thing that we can know is that we don't know.
Yes, but you can know that.
Mhm.
You can really know that you don't know, and that's very powerful. You know, it's a lot more powerful than you might expect, because we're used to pretending we do know, and that's what.
Or trying to know, or
Yeah.
thinking we could ever know.
Exactly,
And
and that's what creates all our problems. Our arrogance, you know. I mean, it's not a malicious arrogance. It's a naive arrogance that we think we can get a handle on things, and by doing that, we just trip ourselves up and tie ourselves in knots, in imaginary knots, you know, that we then are struggling against trying to get out.
Well, we have to do that at work.
Well, you're getting paid to. Make everything really difficult. Here's your paycheck.
No, what makes it difficult? You deal with it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I used to think understanding would reduce psychological pain. The more understanding I had, the less psychological pain. You know, and then I'd be able to see things as they are clearly, and then I'd be liberated in a sense. And that's a never-ending. That was a never-ending loop that I'm pleased to say that I don't entertain. It happens, but
Yeah,
I don't
the
entertain
idea-
it like I used to.
Yeah, the idea that spiritual investigation is a solution to anything is kind of flypaper. It's kind of it's obviously get you into trouble and tie you in knots again, because spiritual investigation is really just a reality check. The point of doing it is because it's true, not because it's going to fix anything. You know, in fact, it may be beneficial in a variety of ways or not, but that's not the point. That's just a byproduct. The point is it's true, it's real, as opposed to bullshit. You know, and if you get to the point where you'd rather have that, it's like, okay, well, it's available, check it out.
It's like Miller Raper when he get to the place. I found it ironic when I read it. When you get to that point of hopelessness, that is truly a divine place to be. He said, huh? What? Because then you're not futuring.
Yes, hope is a fantasy that reality could be something else.
Yeah.
Whereas when you just let go into actuality, it's like, the idea would be, oh my God, I'm losing all hope. It's like, no, hey, dude, check it out. Do it and see what you find. Anyway, why don't we knock off for lunch? It's been a fun morning playing with all this stuff. Because it's kind of loose and rambling and stuff, and that's pretty big. So that's a big plus. But anyway, it's about 12:30. So why don't we move back here like say 2, hour and a half ish for lunch, and we can hang out for a few more hours. And,